For 15 years, I was the genius behind my husband's multimillion-dollar empire. Every award-winning design mine. Every revolutionary concept mine. But on our records his name only. Then I found out about his affair with his 28-year-old assistant. And discovered he'd been planning to divorce me for years. He thought he'd erased every trace of my work. But he forgot about one storage unit that would change everything. My name is Olivia Chen, and for 15 years I was the perfect wife. Supportive, patient, and constantly compromising. I put my career in interior design on hold to raise our children, while my husband Michael built his real estate development company from nothing into a regional powerhouse. What no one knew, not our friends, not his business partners, not even my own family, was that I was the silent architect behind his success. I wasn't just raising our children. I was reviewing contracts at midnight, finding properties before they hit the market, and designing the spaces that became his signature style. His intuitive vision, that clients raved about, those were my sketches, my concepts, my creativity. "It's just easier this way," Michael would say whenever I suggested getting formal credit. "People in this industry expect a certain image. Once we're established, we'll make you official." That once never came. Instead, after 15 years of marriage and 3 children, I discovered Michael had been having an affair with his 28-year-old executive assistant Amber. I found out when I overheard him on the phone in our home office late one night. "The Paris trip is all set," he said, his voice low. "I told Olivia it's the Tokyo development deal. Yes, 2 weeks together. She suspects nothing." I stood frozen in the hallway, my world collapsing around me. Not just because of the affair, but because the Paris trip was supposed to be our anniversary celebration. A trip I'd been planning for months after he'd casually mentioned wanting to see Paris in the spring. I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I did something I should have done years ago. I went through our business records. What I found shattered any remaining illusion. Michael had been systematically removing my contributions from company documentation. Properties I'd found were recorded as his discoveries. Design concepts I'd created were credited to contracted firms. My name appeared nowhere. Even worse, he'd been preparing for a potential divorce for at least 2 years. Assets were being shifted, ownership stakes minimized, and a paper trail created that made it look like I was just a homemaker with no stake in the business I'd helped build. When I finally confronted him, Michael didn't even try to deny the affair. Instead, he laughed. "Prove it," he said when I mentioned my work on the company. "You have no emails, no contracts, nothing with your name on it. You chose to be a stay-at-home mom. Remember, that was your decision." "I designed the Lakeside project," I said, my voice shaking. "I found the Westridge properties. I created the entire concept for." "You offered suggestions," he cut in. "Like any supportive wife would. That doesn't make you a business partner." The divorce that followed was brutal. Michael hired the city's most aggressive divorce attorney, Carlton Wexler, known for his scorched-earth approach to protecting high-net-worth clients. In our first mediation session, Wexler painted a picture of me as a desperate housewife trying to claim credit for my husband's genius out of bitterness over the affair. "Mrs. Chen made a choice 15 years ago to be a homemaker," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Now she wants to be retroactively compensated as if she were a business partner. This is simply opportunistic." My attorney, Diane Rodriguez, warned me it would be difficult to prove my contributions without documentation. "He's been planning this for years, Olivia," she said gently. "He's covered his tracks well." The initial settlement offer was insulting. The house, with a mortgage that had mysteriously doubled in the past year, minimal child support, and a generous alimony that would barely cover our monthly expenses. No ownership stake in the company, no recognition of my contributions, nothing that reflected 15 years of partnership. I nearly gave up. Then I remembered something. My mother's storage unit in Pasadena. 4 years I'd kept backup copies of my work there. Old-school physical copies and early digital files on USB drives, a habit from my college days that Michael had always teased me about. "You're so paranoid," he'd say. Nobody keeps physical backups anymore. The day I went to that storage unit was the day my life changed. It wasn't easy to get there. Michael had temporarily restricted my access to our joint accounts for household management reasons, leaving me scraping together gas money. My mother had passed away 2 years earlier, and I'd continued paying for the unit automatically, never thinking I'd need those old records. In that dusty, forgotten space, I found my salvation: 15 years of evidence. Original sketches with dates and notes. Emails I'd printed because I didn't trust technology. Early versions of proposals with my comments and changes tracked. Photos of me at construction sites Michael claimed he'd visited alone. There were presentation boards from projects dating back to our early days, when Michael was still acknowledging my contributions privately, if not publicly. Files of correspondence with contractors who had addressed emails to both of us. Vendor relationships that I had cultivated which became central to the company's success. But the true smoking gun was a journal, Michael's journal from our early years together. A gift from me that he'd used for a few months, then discarded in a box of sentimental items I'd stored away. In it, he'd written candidly about Olivia's brilliant idea for the Henderson property, and implementing O's design strategy. There were pages where he'd worked through his insecurities, admitting he was taking credit for concepts that O came up with, because he needed the clients to see him as the visionary. With trembling hands, I packed everything into boxes and drove straight to Diane's office. "This changes everything," she said, paging through the evidence. "He's been gaslighting you professionally for years." When my attorney presented this evidence during discovery, Michael's face went pale. His attorney immediately requested a recess. I watched as they huddled in the corner of the conference room, Michael gesturing angrily, Wexler shaking his head in dismay. The settlement offer came the next day. Far more generous than their initial proposal, but still a fraction of what I deserved. I declined. "I don't want a settlement," I told Diane. "I want recognition for my work and fair compensation for my contribution to the business." Michael's next move was predictable. He tried to intimidate me. Late-night calls, veiled threats about fighting for full custody of our children, implications that he would drag my name through the mud. "No one will believe you were anything more than a housewife playing at being an architect," he hissed during one call. "You'll be humiliated." But something had changed in me. The woman who had accepted being a silent partner, who had believed in the promise of someday, was gone. In her place was someone who had found her voice, someone who was done being erased. "Try me," I said calmly. "I have the receipts, Michael. 15 years of them." The case never went to trial. Once Michael realized I had documented evidence that could damage not just his finances but his professional reputation, he agreed to mediation. The final agreement acknowledged my role as an uncredited partner in the business and entitled me to 45% of the company's value. I also received clear co-creator credit on 17 major projects that had established the company's reputation. Most importantly, I got my name back, professionally and literally. Part of our agreement required a public statement acknowledging my contributions to the firm over the years. The narrative changed from Michael Chen's visionary approach to the innovative collaboration between Michael and Olivia Chen. But I wasn't done. With my settlement, I started my own interior design and property development firm, targeting the high-end clients who had always appreciated Michael's vision. I named it Visible Design, a small private joke at my own expense. Starting over wasn't easy. Michael still had connections, influence, and spite. He spread rumors about my mental health issues, and implied I was difficult to work with. Some doors closed before I could even knock. What saved me were the relationships I had built over the years. Contractors who knew I was the one who actually answered emails at midnight to solve problems. Vendors who remembered I was the one who fought for their invoices to be paid on time. Junior designers who had watched me create concepts that Michael presented as his own. One by one, they came forward to work with me. "We always knew," one contractor told me. "We just didn't know you knew." Within a year, 3 of Michael's biggest clients had switched to my company. Projects he'd dismissed as too feminine or too experimental became signature achievements for my firm. I hired young female designers who had been overlooked at larger firms, creating an environment where credit was shared and contributions acknowledged. The first time one of my projects won an industry award, an innovative mixed-use development that incorporated sustainability features Michael had called hippie nonsense, I stood on stage alone, but I wasn't alone. My team was in the audience, my children were beaming with pride, and I finally understood the power of visibility. 2 years after our divorce at a major industry event, I found myself face-to-face with Michael for the first time since the final mediation. He looked older, tired around the eyes. The whispered rumors were that Chen Development was struggling without my design sense and attention to detail. "Your West Side project," he said stiffly. "The sustainable concept. It's impressive." Smiled. "Thank you, Michael. That's actually one you turned down when I suggested it 3 years ago. Too experimental, you said." He flinched. "Olivia, No need," I cut him off. "We're colleagues now. Competitors even. Nothing more." As I walked away, I caught a glimpse of Amber, now his wife, watching us. She looked anxious, unsure. I recognized that look. I'd worn it myself during the later years of our marriage. Later that evening, she approached me at the bar. She was still beautiful, still young, but there was something diminished about her. The confident executive assistant had been replaced by someone who checked her phone nervously, who glanced across the room to track Michael's movements. "Can I ask you something?" she said, her voice barely audible over the crowd. He nodded. "How did you do it? Start over, build something on your own?" I studied her face. Younger than mine but already showing the strain of being with a man like Michael. "I stopped being a silent partner in my own life," I said. "And honestly, it started when I finally kept receipts." She looked confused for a moment, then understanding dawned in her eyes. "He's doing it again, isn't he?" I asked gently. Her eyes filled with tears. "I designed the entire riverfront plaza," she whispered. "He presented it last month as his concept." I left her with my business card. Whether she was looking for design advice or life advice, I wasn't sure. But I knew one thing. I was no longer silent, no longer invisible, and my story was just beginning. The next day, at my office, my assistant handed me an envelope that had been delivered by courier. Inside was a USB drive and a note in familiar handwriting. "Some ideas I've been working on. I'd appreciate your feedback." I smiled as I plugged in the drive. The file showed remarkable talent, innovative concepts and thoughtful details that reminded me of my own early work. There was also a folder labeled Documentation, containing emails, meeting notes, and recordings that clearly showed these were Amber's creations, despite being presented as Michael's. 1 week later, Amber joined Visible Design as a senior designer. The announcement made waves in our industry, and Michael's furious calls went straight to voicemail. 3 months after that, she filed for divorce. When people ask me now about the secret to my success, I tell them the truth. I learned that being supportive doesn't mean being invisible. I learned that my voice matters. And most importantly, I learned that the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting free. My children understood this lesson better than anyone. My daughter, now studying architecture in college, proudly puts her name on every project. My sons have grown into young men who value women's contributions and voices. The cycle has been broken. Last month, I was asked to give the keynote address at the Women in Architecture and Design conference. As I looked out at the audience of talented women, some established, some just starting their careers, I shared the most important lesson of my journey. Your work deserves your name. Your ideas deserve attribution. Your contributions matter. Don't let anyone convince you to be the silent partner in your own success story. After the speech, a young designer approached me, clutching a portfolio. "I've been letting my boyfriend present my designs as collaborative projects," she admitted. "He says it's easier for him to get meetings." I placed my hand on her portfolio. "What's your name?" I asked. "Jennifer," she replied. Well, Jennifer, I said, it's time the world knows your name as well as they know your work. As I walked away, I noticed Amber standing nearby, smiling. She was now a partner at Visible Design, her name rightfully attached to her acclaimed projects. She had found her voice, just as I had found mine. Some lessons need to be learned firsthand. And sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't getting even. It's showing others how to rise. The silent partner no more. I had become both visible and vocal. Not just for myself, but for all the women who had been taught to stand in the shadows of the men who took credit for their work. Michael's company filed for restructuring last year. I didn't celebrate the news. There was no joy in watching something I had helped build struggle. But there was a certain poetic justice in knowing that the true creative force behind Chen Development had never been Michael alone. The greatest victory wasn't in Michael's downfall. It was in my rise, in reclaiming my name, my work, and my worth. It was in creating a company where everyone's contributions were valued and acknowledged. Sometimes I think about that night in the hallway, overhearing Michael's plans for Paris. In a strange way, I'm grateful. Without that moment of painful clarity, I might have remained the silent partner forever, always creating, never receiving credit, my name forever absent from the work that carried my fingerprints. Now, when I walk through spaces I've designed, when I see my name on award plaques and industry publications, when I mentor young designers who aren't afraid to claim their work, I know that being silent was never my destiny. My voice, my vision, my name, they were always there, waiting for me to claim them. And in the end, finding my voice was the most beautiful design of all.